Welcome to Positivity is the Way to Go. He is a host, producer of Outside the NFL podcast for 18 episodes, Spotify and Substack in 2024. Currently guest NFL analyst in the Rider Sports in the show, Rider Sports Show. Welcome my guest today, Albert Lanier. How you doing today, man?
I'm fine. And by the way, the sports show is the Writer Report. So that can be found on mixlr.com. So if people want to tune in, it's a live, I believe it's live, at least when I've done it. It's a live sports show. Well, it's not live on YouTube when you hear it later, but it's a sports show from Temecula, California. So it's called the Writer Report. You know the Ryder Cup, same spelling. So glad to be with you on Positivity is the Way to Go. I guess it must be some kind of pattern with me. I was a guest a few years ago on a show called Love, Laughter, and Happiness. And so it must be a pattern somehow. Love, laughter, happiness, and positivity is the way to go. I haven't done a show yet called Negativity is the Way to Go, or hate, or hate, humorlessness, and unhappiness. I haven't done those shows, so I don't know if this is a sign. I don't know. I have no idea. But it's nice to be on Positivity is the Way to Go, which sounds a lot better than say Up with People. Forget Up with People. Positivity is the way. At least it's a bit more up there. Like, okay, I see what you're about. Great. Up with People. How up are we talking about? So, but yes, I am sports. I do the NFL Hot Topics segment on the Writer Report, which can be heard Mondays. I do the NFL. And my understanding is that you are, from having seen the show, that you're into football yourself, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm I'm a Bears fan.
Well, you have a lot to be. Well, you have some. Well, you lost recently, but you have a good amount to be happy about right now. I mean, it's better to be a Bears fan now than it was last year.
Well, not the latest.
Well, you had one loss, but recently, but the team's on the way up if they can sustain it. Ben Johnson was a good hire for the Bears, and at this point, we have to look at the season, because I'm someone who's firmly against fixated or calcified pronouncements in regards to sports teams. But I would have to say that the Bears are on the way up. They may even get a winning season this year. Hard to say right now, but it's a possibility. But I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, so it's different for me.
Yeah, I'm a Cubs fan too, man.
Unfortunately, they only went so far in the playoffs. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what made you become a freelancer and mainstream? Because normally, freelancing is like a startup, and sometimes people don't go to mainstream. You may not have the success. Like when I was working for this day now as a brand ambassador, Gather Social, it was like kind of a startup, but it was a failed startup. It didn't get anywhere. Any traction at all,
That it's interesting that you put it in those terms, because from what you're noting, and I think the way things are now, I think being a freelancer now, in some respects, depending on what market you're in and what outlet you're on, may seem more of a startup kind of economic and business affair, as opposed to more of, I guess, your stable kind of, I don't know, blue chip is quite the word for it. But are we getting some distortion there for some reason?
Say it again.
I think you're getting some distortion. It sounded like there was some distortion there.
Oh, no, no,
But
no.
anyway,
I'm here.
okay. So again, I think the way you phrased it is interesting because when I started as a freelancer, it was the 90s. It was 1994 when I became a freelance writer and a print journalist. And I became a freelancer because, and I always say this in interviews, I always say this in interviews. I became a freelancer because I was looking for work. I was an out of work radio guy and I was looking for radio gigs. And I wasn't getting anywhere looking for radio gigs. I used to play oldies rock music, Beatles, Stones, Doors, for, of course, an oldies rock station. And I left that station. I was looking for work, playing music, and wasn't getting too far after a couple months. And then for some unknown reason, I don't know why, I got the idea to freelance. Now, to this day, I don't know why I got this idea. I don't know why it happened this way. I really don't. Because I never read about freelancing at that point. I hadn't seen anything about freelancing. I don't know where I got the idea, but I got the idea. Maybe it's from a high school journalism class or something like that, because I was on my high school newspaper. But I decided I got the phone book and looked up magazines and newspapers and other periodicals and publications. I called up a number of them and I wound up getting a couple of gigs. One was interviewing the governor and lieutenant governor candidates in the state that I come from, my home state. And I ended up also doing an article on parents and children's films at the time. It was very good timing because The Lion King was the big hit, or one of the big hits of 1994. Forrest Gump, it's not really a family film, but it's a PG rated movie. And so that kind of fit within the rubric of what I was going for, which is looking at G and PG rated films and the success they were having. So I started with those two and I kept getting work and I kept getting work and I kept getting work. So, as they say, I don't know anything about gambling or know much about gambling, but as they say, if a slot machine's paying off, you don't walk away. So kept paying off, I kept getting work. And that's why I became a freelancer. I ended up becoming a freelance writer and print journalist, writing for newspapers like Honolulu Weekly and Pacific Business News, and Asian Week, which was in San Francisco, and also magazines like Hawaii Magazine and Hawaii Film and Video and Hawaii Skin Diver and a number of other magazines, and a business magazine called Accelerate. That was one of my last freelance magazine pieces. And I did that for 22 years. Retired in 2017. Guess that's a long story.
Sorry, man. There's been a lot of static, man.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you were able to tune it out. So thanks for that.
Yeah, but what do you think about being a journalist today? Because now journalism is very hard. Because sometimes people they want to give the story to the people that they know. Like the gambling scandal and stuff. Like Damon Jones. He would give LeBron. He will get information from LeBron James. The mafia and stuff. In the NBA. Like people got their own people that they want to give the scoops to and stuff, and they don't want to give scoop to other people.
Well, that's part of the business, getting scoops, getting exclusives, that's part of the business. Journalism is super competitive, even at my level as a local and regional freelance journalist and as a print journalist, it's competitive. No one's doing you favors, so the idea, that's part of what the business is about as a journalist, is getting sources and also getting in touch with other people who might be sources. And if they come to you and say, hey, I got something for you, I got some info for you, that may be part of what you're talking about with the NBA gambling scandal. And, with journalism, when I was a journalist, when I was a reporter, sometimes you have to be in the right place at the right time. It also depends on if you're, being, what is that? I was a freelancer, so I would either pitch or was on assignment most of the time, but I would pitch. So it really depends if you're in a position to able to get that, give it to your, get your editor interested, or if you're in TV, of course. I never worked in broadcast other than radio, playing music. But if you're in broadcast, getting your producer interested. But it's a matter of having the right sources, the right contacts, and being in the right place when you talk about a story like that. Now, anyone can write about it, after it breaks and so forth. But that's what a lot of journalism is about. It's about being able to have the right sources and being in the right environments that you could hear things, pick up on things, and start looking into and investigating them.
Yep. So, yeah, because you got to be entrusted with information. When you doing like a big job, and when you leak the story and stuff, people got to make sure that you are not gonna like leak anything, like the NBA draft. With the Dallas Mavericks got number one pick, everybody thought it was rigged, but they didn't leak anything at all. They had like 8% chance to win the lottery. And people thought it was like kind of rigged and stuff.
Well, it depends. In some cases, when you get an exclusive, you may have to do an agreement that, okay, you got to wait for this to happen. In this case, it would be the draft or the beat before you can go and release the piece, or release a segment, or release whatever is going to come out there, whatever news story is going to come out there. So sometimes those agreements are kind of made to get an exclusive.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the NFL season right now? Because Kansas City been on the road, and they got Rasheed Rice back, and everybody's saying Kansas City is like they the favorite in Vegas right now, plus 650. And everybody think like Indianapolis, Daniel Jones, they think he's kind of fried right now and stuff. And they think Buffalo can't be trusted right now, And in the NFC, they think the Eagles, they got like problems with AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts and everything, And people right now don't know who coming out the NFC with it being wide open right now, In the AFC, people saying that the Chiefs gonna get back to the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, in regards to the AFC, let's start there. The idea of the Chiefs being the best, I mean, some of these pundits, some of these professional sports prognosticators have said the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL. That's ludicrous. That's ridiculous. The Chiefs are not the best team. This is a team that started out, I think, with 2 losses, but they lost to the Chargers the first game. This is a team that looked bad. And I look bad in the sense that they didn't quite have the offense that they have now. Granted, it helped that James Worthy came back. It helped that Rasheed Rice came back. It helped that you had help from people like Pacheco and Hollywood Brown and, of course, Kelsey. Right now, what you're seeing is that the Chiefs' offense, if you could call it that, but their offense right now is about as good as it's going to get. Their offense has really gone down. Where the Chiefs seem to have invested is in defense. And that defense has really, I believe, kind of gotten them or helped get them to the Super Bowl previously, and has really gotten them through playoff games. So the Chiefs are one of the most overrated teams right now. Yes, they got back in their winning form, but getting back in winning form doesn't mean you're one of the best teams in the AFC or in the NFL. I mean, it's ridiculous to argue that. And look, they won a very convincing game against Washington recently. And they scored like, 3, maybe 4 touchdowns. But the reality is Washington's reeling. They lost to Chicago, your team, in a game they should have won. They got blown out by Dallas, and then they faced the Chiefs, and you had Jaden Daniels out. So I'm not impressed with the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, their offense is where it should be. So offensively, they're cooking with grease right now. They're a good team, but they're not a great team. You know what is a great team, though, is the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts are a great team because they are the closest to a consistent team that I've seen in the NFL this year. You got Jonathan Taylor, who I think has over 800 yards. You've got Daniel Jones, who has certainly turned into a premier quarterback at this moment. Whether he'll continue to be is another story, but he's turned into a premier quarterback in this moment. You've got a very good offensive line. As someone who now analyzes the NFL, I guess on the radio and online, at least on the radio, I did do it on my podcast. My position has always been the most important part of an NFL football team is the offensive line, not the defensive line. The defensive line is important. If you talk about Dallas, yeah, that's really important. They could use one. And they could use a backfield too. But the most important component is the offensive line. Because if your offensive line can't keep the quarterback in a clean pocket and can't keep him throwing, and also more importantly, can't provide enough support that allows good blocking for your running game and for your RBs, running backs, to do it, then you're not going to have a lot of success. Or you might have some success, but for the most part, you will fail. The offensive line is the key in football. Anyone who argues otherwise, I think, is mistaken. You can have your views. So you look at Indianapolis Colts; they have a very good offensive line, providing clean pockets. And this is a team that's the closest to a consistent team. And some people are still in doubt of the Colts. I can understand. It's fashionable. I'm cynical and jaded when it comes to the NFL and everything else in life. But I saw them play the Rams. And when I saw them play the Rams and lose, this is what may surprise some people. When I saw them play the Rams and lose to the Rams, that's when I knew this team's got it. This team's got the right stuff. However you define it and the right stuff, the Indianapolis Colts have it. Good offensive line, good play, good performance and state of play from the QB1 position, excellent running from their star running back. When you have a combination like that, the possibilities are endless. And I'm trying to think, is there anyone else in the AFC you want me to talk about?
Well, you got the Patriots. They're a dark horse. You think that the Patriots are sleeping? You think that they could make some noise?
I think they've already begun to make noise right now. Because if you look at the game they played against the Bills, that was the turnaround game. They beat the Bills. They got 2 turnovers off the Bills. That was very important because I didn't see a lot of turnovers off the Buffalo Bills. Not only this year, but I think in the last couple of seasons, maybe. So you look at those turnovers and you look at the way Drake May was playing. I said this last year on Outside the NFL, my podcast, which can be found on Spotify. I don't do the podcast anymore, but it can still be found on Spotify. What I said on my podcast last year is Drake May is pretty good. He's got talent and he can play. And I said this last year, so I went publicly and said this last year. And now people are seeing the proof of this. if they had doubts. Drake May in that game against the Bills, you saw the way he got the ball off to his receivers, even though he's almost getting brought to the ground. And they're winning games. They're winning games. The Patriots are probably one of the big surprises this year in not only the AFC, but the NFL. And I said before, the Bills have to watch out. They're looking good right now, but the Bills may go in as if this continues, the Bills may go in as a wild card. Because,
but
go ahead.
Patriots got good coach and everything. Like last year, they had he was a defensive coach and everything. So they didn't. He was a first year coach and stuff. He was a defensive guy. And Robert Kraft, he made a bad move with that move. Now they got Mike Vrabel, a competent coach now, and McDaniel called the plays, which he always been a good offensive coordinator, but never a good coach in NFL. Right. And now you see things are much improved now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good observation. When they hired Vrabel, I knew that was going to work. I just knew it. I said that was a very good thing. The thing about Vrabel is this. I couldn't understand when he left the Titans. I couldn't understand why no one was going for this guy.
Well, because he left the Titans. He left the Titans because it was bad management, man. They had bad ownership,
I understand
They got
that.
like John Robinson, and they don't know. That's why they fired Brian Callahan 5 games into the season. They don't have a clue of what they're doing as an organization right now. They don't know how to develop.
I don't disagree with you.
They're gonna have to get an offensive coach like Ben Johnson. They need to get a coach to help Ken Ward and get them back on track. In the off season, they talking about Matt Nagy, from the Chiefs, but I think Matt Nagy is good because Andy Reid. Same thing with Eric Bieniemy, He he making them look good than they are, his play callers. Look at Eric Bieniemy, he haven't done nothing since he left the Chiefs.
Well, I'm a fan of 3 teams. One of them is the Las Vegas Raiders. And when Josh McDaniel was the coach with the Raiders, I wasn't one of those people that was furious at him, angry, upset. I just saw him for what he was. I said, he's a talented offensive coordinator.
Yes, and he never was good. He went to Denver. He did not
make it as a head coach. That happens. But you got to get the chance. That's what people have to understand. You got to get the chance to be a HC. You got to get a chance to get a head coach, and you got to adapt to it. For some people, it's very. I mean, it's not the right fit. I mean, they're better at running an offense and being able to make play calls. And I think Josh McDaniel was very successful with the Patriots previously. I think it was a smart move on their part to bring him back as an OC. I think bringing Vrabel there was a great hire. Drake Mayo, I saw him as a fill-in. I saw him as temporary. I don't have anything against the guy, but he was a fill-in to me. I think when he also said, he thought the team was soft and that leaked out, and that kind of left to me a bad taste in the mouth. I'm like, I could see, I guess that would have worked maybe in the 70s, in the 80s, but I think you have to do more than just chew people out. It's fine if you can chew people out, but I don't know that that's a smart move to call your team soft. But
Well, Albert, it was a pleasure having you on, man, and everything. And I will have you on soon, man, again, man, to talk more NFL. Because sorry about all the difficulties and stuff, man.
Well, yeah, but I did want to mention a couple of things. One, you got the big, because you mentioned Kansas City previously. I mentioned the Bills.
Yeah.
You got the huge Kansas City Bills matchup this week It's week 9 of the NFL. It's the midway point of the NFL. So that's
Yeah,
going to
but
be that's
the
a
Bills
big
always,
matchup.
the
But
Bills always beat them in the regular season though, and the Chiefs
and
beat them
lose
in
in
the
the
playoffs.
playoff, right?
So yeah,
That's why I
exactly.
like the regular season meetings a lot better. When they play during the regular season, I always prefer that to the playoffs. For some reason, I certainly do. So that's a big one. I guess you have Colts Steelers too. That's going to be a very interesting
Yeah, but
game.
I think the Colts gonna win though. I think the Steelers are reeling, man. Like they gave up 17 points the fourth quarter to the Packers, man, and they blew that game. And Rodgers, he got 16 touchdowns and 3 interceptions this year. So he playing really good at quarterback position, better than a lot of
Right.
experts say.
Well, yeah, having Aaron Rodgers was, I think, brilliant on the part of the Rooneys and on Mike Tomlin. Bringing him into the Steelers was a good fit. What you're seeing, I'm also a Steelers fan. The thing about the Steelers is that you have to look at is the fact that, yeah, people talk about the high price nature of their defensive line and the age factor. I think the thing about this defense is that sometimes it can be very good and sometimes it can be lackluster. So it's a bit of it's a bit of an ellipsis, right? It's a bit, blue dot. Like again, I think what happens is in that game against the Packers got hot. Their offense just really did a very good job. And I think what the Steelers defense needs to do is go back to trying to force turnovers and get turnovers, get interceptions, getting sacks, obviously. But I think they need to be disruptive. And I think their defense works when they're intercepting the ball, when they're getting turnovers, getting fumbles, and they're getting to the quarterback. And of course, offensive line has a lot to do with it, as I mentioned before. So in that game against the Colts have a good offensive line. Steelers have to find a way to be disruptive if they're going to. The defense has to step up and be disruptive if they're going to beat the Colts.
Well, I don't know why you expecting that when they gave up 30 pounds against Justin Fields and Justin Fields is running quarterback. If they gave up that much against the Jets, what makes think they're gonna do anything against Daniel Jones?
If they're going to win, the defense has to have a good game. I don't think having the offense score 3 or 4 touchdowns alone is going to do it. I mean, they played a close game against the Bengals, and the Steelers ended up losing.
Well, I got the Colts winning that game easy, man, because they all cylinders.
But for the Steelers, if they intend to win, right? But if the Steelers intend to win, this is what I'm saying. This is what they need to do to win. Whether they'll win or not, it's going to be hard. Like I said, the Colts have a good offensive line. They're running the ball well.
They remind me of the Eagles last. They remind me of the Eagles last year with the offensive line, Jonathan Taylor. They remind me of the Eagles last year. Saquon, Daniel Jones.
Interesting you bring up the Eagles because they had that game against the Giants. Saquon Barkley had a huge game.
AJ Brown was out. AJ Brown, he want the ball. They didn't have to deal with the headache in the game. That's why.
Well,
but when he comes back to dynamic,
I've said this before. I'll say it again because I also have a show on YouTube, and people should check it out. It's called The Wise Guy Show, and you can find it on my YouTube channel, which is writer Albert Lanier 3434 or at writer Albert Lanier 3434, where I analyze the NFL. It's called The Wise Guy Show. You can find it at writer Albert Lanier on YouTube. But it's interesting you bring up the Eagles because when you look at the Eagles and you look at this team, I've said this before, they're a dysfunctional team. I don't know why the national media, the national sports media doesn't want to mention this. They are a dysfunctional team. It's not just A.J. Brown. It's whatever going on. And I've said this on Outside the NFL, my podcast that I did last year. I said a football team is not based solely on the field and what happens on the field. It's what happens in the locker room. It's what happens on the practice facility. It happens in the front office. It's what happens everywhere in the organization. If you look at what happened with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets and what went on last year, that was the example that I gave last year. This year, I think there's been something going on with this Eagles team for at least a couple of years. I think this team is at its core dysfunctional, but they've managed to be successful and win a Super Bowl despite their dysfunction. Why people aren't willing to call it out, I don't know. Again, there's a lot of illusion in the world of sports and I guess sports media, but the reality is the Eagles are a dysfunctional team. You see that A.J. Brown is one manifestation of that symptom, but they're a dysfunctional team. They're doing well thus far, but that team's vulnerable. Look at the losses that they had. The Giants beat them previously. Now, granted, they had Scatterboo, and they played a lot better than they did in this game, the recent loss. But the Eagles are very vulnerable. They're vulnerable. Their offense is just, even with that game with the Giants, it's just getting back online. They had a really good game against the Buccaneers and beat them. But their offense has just not been as productive and as stable and as effective as it has been in the Buccaneers game and also in the recent Giants game, just the Giants recently.
Yeah, because they got to run the ball and everything. They got to get back to Saquon Barkley being a focal point of the offense and then send out the play action pass off of that. That's how they were successful last year. And I think that it kill everything that they whatever ails them. Because you see what coach doing with JT. He generally tell us MVP of the league right now, even though they don't give anybody besides quarterback.
Well, the thing about it is that the Eagles have to have a kind of stable offensive plan to be, as a team. And I think what's happened, they have to have some stability in terms of scoring. And I think what's happened is in games they played, they've made a move here defensively, or they made a move in special teams. You look at that Rams game where they blocked the punt, they ran it back. They've made a move here and there. That's a way to win games, but you can't always win games that way. And that, maybe you can get through one playoff game that way. But I think the Eagles are fortunate that the NFC East is weak this year.
Yeah, well, Al, it was a pleasure having you on again, man, and we'll do this again, man. You have a good night, man.
And you too. You enjoy yourself. Thank you for having me on the show.